The gathering of the tribes of Israel. In Israel, there are various Jewish religious groups who actively work towards fulfilling and hurrying the realization of prophecies. Their research had led to the identification of communities across the globe who claim to be the descendants of the Israelite tribes. Furthermore, these groups do show shared customs and traditions that are very closely connected to the Jewish traditions, including the observance of the Shabbat, commencing on Friday evening, and the practice of segregating women during their menstrual cycles, among other notable examples. This gathering is undeniably authentic and legitimate, bolstered by the very field of genetic science, which confirms the Israelite origins of these communities. Consequently, there remains no room for doubt that these prophecies are also being fulfilled in this way. Nonetheless, it is crucial to acknowledge that our current understanding merely scratches the surface of this complex situation. Finding the most remotely scattered Israelite groups is just the final cut of the whole process. The unification of the entire Israelite community is a journey that began long ago, notably marked by the devastation of the sanctuary by the Roman forces and the beginning of the ultimate exile of the remaining Judean tribes. Who comprised the Jewish population that was expelled 2,000 years ago? It is unusual for people to realize, let alone discuss, the fact that at the time of the destruction of the sanctuary and the expulsion, not 2, but 4 tribes were still present in Judea. This historical nuance is often neglected in discussions. Simeon did not entirely vanish, but rather merged with the tribe of Judah. Simeon may have lost its distinct tribal identity, but its members continue to be an integral part of the Jewish people. Likewise, a similar transformation took place later with the tribe of Benjamin. Starting with the expulsion, its tribal identity slowly faded in the collective consciousness and gradually merged with the collective group comprising Judah, including Simeon, the remainder of the Levi tribe, and Benjamin itself. This process ultimately led to the emergence of the ethno-religious group known as Jews today. The members of the tribe of Levi were dispersed among the other tribes following the conquest led by Joshua, Yahushua, aligning with the prophecy and promise made by Jacob. They established themselves in numerous cities, often referred to as cities of refuge. Consequently, the Levites dwelled within the territories of Simeon, Judah, and Benjamin. It is conceivable that during the deportation of the other tribes, a significant number of Levites who were living among them opted to migrate southward to avoid exile, primarily settling in the territory of Benjamin, which encompassed the city of Jerusalem. It is indeed possible that only a limited number of Levi tribe members were deported along with the 10 tribes, as evidenced by the substantial presence of Kohanim, members of the priestly lineage, among today's Jewish population. Indeed, there appears to be a relative high proportion of Kohanim within the Jewish community in Hungary, for example, identifiable by the initial letters K, C, or CS in their last names. It has been a long-standing tradition for Levites, and particularly Kohanim, to retain the initial letter of their priestly status when adopting foreign names during their exile, starting with the letter L for simple Levites, for example. Furthermore, it is also possible to consider that Kohanim being the priestly lineage, received a special blessing from the Eternal regarding their descendants, which could have contributed to a more pronounced increase in their numbers over the centuries compared to the other tribes. While I lack direct knowledge and insight into this matter, I just have personally observed these trends. 10 tribes have, however, disappeared. As we observe, at least 3 tribes have endured to the present day, albeit with a blending of their identities, making it challenging for individuals within the Jewish community to definitively trace their lineage to Benjamin or Simeon. However, if there are indeed 4 tribes still in existence, the 4th being the remnant of Levi, encompassing the Kohanim as mentioned earlier, then why does Yahuwah himself refer to the lost 10 tribes through the prophets? Well, we have to remember 1 or 2 important things. The first is that the tribe of Joseph divided into 2 groups, giving rise to the 2 tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. Hence we now speak not of 12, but of 13 tribes. Additionally, Manasseh itself experienced a division on the banks of the Jordan. A portion of the tribe remained on the eastern bank of the river alongside with the tribes of Gad and Reuben, while the other part crossed the Jordan to take their rightful place in the Holy Land. Consequently, out of the original 12 tribes, 1 split into 2, and 1 of those 2 further subdivided, resulting in a total of 14 distinct groups. Therefore, within the contemporary Jewish community, which encompasses the entirety of Benjamin and Judah, along with Simeon and the remaining Levi tribe, there are indeed 10 tribes scattered across the globe, awaiting reunification. To be precise, this reunification process has been on the way for an extended period, but in a quiet and invisible way. The fulfillment of these prophecies was not initiated by contemporary rabbis, but has been ongoing for 2,000 years following the death, the resurrection, and the ascension of Yahushua, the last and final great rabbi, according to the order of Melchizedek. Indeed, a process spanning 2,000 years. It's an intriguing perspective that the groups assimilating into the Jewish people over centuries, originally composed of Judah, Simeon, Benjamin, and Levi, could potentially include descendants of the 10 tribes deported by the Persians to the northeast of the Kingdom of Israel. It's interesting to note that according to the teachings of the so-called wise men of Israel, after the people's return to the Holy Land, every Jew will be revealed their personal tribal lineage and identity. And while this prophecy originates from the Talmud rather than the Tanakh, the Old Testament, it still carries a prophetic dimension and may manifest in the tangible world in the future. Israelite lineage, like any other heritage, seems to possess the ability to foster a spiritual connection among those who belong to this common bloodline. Many individuals have experienced the instinctive recognition of those who share their origins, even without uttering a word, particularly when we are abroad. Rather than labeling this as chauvinism, it is more appropriate to describe it as a community or family spirit, as this feeling should not necessarily lead to the rejection or contempt towards other ethnic and cultural groups. So when we meet a compatriot abroad, we are often animated by a particular enthusiasm, much more than if we had met in our own land of origin. Here we can see that blood can act like a magnet, drawing people together. In a manner akin to how a magnet attracts objects composed of similar materials, the Israelites were attracted during their wanderings of more than 2,800 years by the moving magnet called Judah, and which has been in exile for 2,000 years. These re-assimilated individuals have since seamlessly integrated into the broader ethnic group recognized today as Jews. Yet we lack knowledge about their exact original tribal affiliations. It appears that what we commonly refer to as Jews in contemporary times may encompass not only the descendants of the tribe of Judah, including Benjamin, Levi, and Simeon, but also those of all the other tribes, extending beyond the confines of Judah's lineage. Khazar theory. It is essential to emphasize that the Khazarian theory is often promoted by anti-Semites. According to this theory, Jewish communities in Central and Eastern Europe are not the descendants of the Israelite tribes of Judea, but rather the offspring of the Khazarian people who adopted Judaism during the ancient Khazar Empire, a group of Scythian descent. Genetic research conducted since then has not definitely settled this question. Even among Jewish geneticists, there is a division of opinion on whether the genetic components found in the DNA of Jews from the regions such as Germany, Austria, Poland, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Ukraine, Russia, and Lithuania truly demonstrates and prove Israelite origins. The Khazar theory suggests that this Scythian ethnic group converted to Judaism at some point, potentially during the decline of the Roman Empire. However, it is widely believed that this conversion mainly affected the Khazar ruling class and nobility without significantly impacting the general population. However, it is not excluded that the anti-Semites are right and that my own Jewish ancestors may have stronger ties to the Khazarian people rather than to the tribe of Judah. However, the Khazar conversion might not be a mere coincidence. Let's delve into the identity of the Khazars and the location of their empire. They were situated somewhere between the territory of Armenia and present-day Turkey, northeast of Israel. This happens to be the very area where the Persians exiled the tribes. The book called The 13th Tribe, written by the Hungarian Jew Arthur Koestler, perhaps touched on the essence, because Koestler's suicidal attempt to annihilate his own and the Jewish spirit in general could take an unexpected prophetic turn and will most likely reveal a shocking truth to us in the near future. If it turns out at all that the Khazarian theory is really true and affects larger masses, of course. It is also possible that the present-day name of the modern Jewish state, Israel, which was predominantly chosen by European Ashkenazi Jewish survivors of the Holocaust, might unconsciously hold a prophetic connection to its Israelite origins. It would have made more sense to rename this region Judea, which was the name used before the remnants of the chosen people were exiled from the place. Despite everything, they choose the name Israel. There is a strong possibility that the region subsequently known as Khazaria served as the gathering place for the Israelite tribes during their exile by the Persians. Subsequently, certain groups continued their exile, leading to the emergence of small communities of Israelite origin across Asia and Africa that have been discovered in recent decades. And now let's think a bit about the irrationality of the conversion of the Khazars. Because most historians tell us that the Khazars were forced, according to them, to make a choice and adopt one of the three great monotheistic religions for diplomatic reasons. And since on one side was the Christian world, with which they did not have very good relations, and on the other side was the Islamic world, which was not much more sympathetic in their eyes than the first either, they would have logically choose the Jewish religion, a sort of diplomatic choice of neutrality and status quo. What a stupid idea could have given rise to this kind of theory in the minds of historians? Why would they have had any interest in taking a small, insignificant religion that was extremely vulnerable, militarily, compared to the two great powers previously mentioned? Especially knowing the hatred which animates these two spirits, denominational Christianity and Islam, in relation to the originally elected people of the book, that each one of them would like to take the place as the chosen people, as the firstborn, since they are the spiritual and sometimes even the physical descendants of Esau and Ishmael. Why couldn't the Khazarians have allowed themselves to just preserve their pagan religion and not change a thing about it? Even if it means having to undergo pressure from both sides, whether because of paganism or because of a religion that is even more compromising in the face of the two great rising powers. Not to mention the fact that these Khazars are the cousins of the Huns, the Magyars, the Tatars, etc. Therefore, an extremely warlike, powerful and strong people. Just hearing their name made their neighboring people pee in their panties. Would such warriors, at the height of their power, really have been forced to adopt a new religion for political reasons? I highly doubt it. And even if they happen to weaken and lose power and strength, you should know that this type of people prefers to choose death than submission. A bit like the Northern American Indians, who by the way are also of a close bloodline, and who could never been enslaved by anyone and preferred to fight to the last man, rather than submit to the white-skinned ones. Now, if the Khazars really converted to Judaism, there must have been entirely different reasons. Those that I have just described previously, as well as in two other of my teachings, anti-Semitism and anti-Christianity, as well as Jewish state and Zionism, that you can find on my YouTube channel. So let's imagine a barbarian people at the height of their glory, their wealth and their power, who meet with a handful of Judeans freshly exiled from their land. These Judeans, modestly dressed, appear before these princes in ceremonial clothing, and the latter find nothing else to do and to feel than an irresistible desire to convert to the religion of these losers, of which even the temple has just been destroyed. Is there the slightest ounce of rationalism in such a story? Have we ever seen such a thing happen in the history of humanity, except in comedies or jokes? It is as if at the sight of migrants today, Viktor Orban would feel an irresistible urge to leave his post as Hungarian Prime Minister, to convert to Islam, and to take the road and live in camps on the other side of the iron barrier that he himself had built. And if my theory may seem as hilarious and ridiculous as a Marx Brothers or a Woody Allen movie, I still can say nothing other than there is no other explanation for this. other tribes. I also have serious suspicions about certain peoples and ethnic groups who still live today in the Caucasus and North Arabia region because of their situation and the degree of persecution they suffer. Why do Turks hate Armenians so much that they committed a genocide against them? And even today, a whole neighborhood in the old city of Jerusalem is called the Armenian Quarter, named after Christian Armenian settlers who fled Turkish violence. But we could also mention the Kurds, and do not find their place anywhere. And despite their Muslim faith and religion, they have very good relations with the modern Jewish state. Certainly not only because they obtained their weapons there to defend themselves against the Turk mentioned above, although the later fact obviously strengthens their sympathy. But the Middle Eastern Arabs, often referred to as Palestinians, might also hold some surprises. On more than one occasion, I found myself mistakenly confusing a Palestinian Arab with a Jew and vice versa. That was highly funny, by the way. According to certain historians, there's a theory suggesting that some Palestinians could have ancestral ties to repatriated Israelites who later assimilated into Islam, leading to a loss of their original identity. But here it is very important to note that this theory doesn't encompass the entire population, but it would only be true for a specific segment of individuals that are today collectively identified as Palestinians. And we can also consider the cases of the Druze and the Samaritans, both of whom had always claimed to be from Israelite origin, and surely they are, even if they still persist in their own twisted identity. Additionally, there is the case of the Afghan Pashtun ethnic group, traditionally believing themselves to be the descendants of the Israelite tribes, at least a majority of them. Even among the Taliban, many fighters are of Pashtun origin and carry a dual identity, embracing both their Israelite heritage and an adherence to extremist Islamism. While they may not openly disclose their Israelite identity to their non-Pashtun Taliban mates for understandable reasons, but most of them are still aware of it, whether they like it or not. The lost tribe of Judah. It is important not to overlook the fact that while the tribe of Judah has maintained its identity over the ages, there have been individuals and even entire groups from this tribe who temporarily lost their connection with their people, leading to a period where their identity was forgotten. This is likely the case for the Sabeans or Mandeans, which is an ethno-religious group consisting of approximately 200,000 or 300,000 members, primarily residing in Iraq, but now forced into exile, mostly in Sweden. The Sabeans originally comprised a group of Judeans who chose to remain in Babylon, not only resisting to the return to the Holy Land, but also expressing the desire to alter their religion and identity. That is the official view of Arab historicists concerning these people. These Sabeans were later joined by the disciples of John the Baptist, who fled Judea after they took John's head. These disciples indeed suddenly disappear from the New Testament, and nobody really knows what happened to them. Most of historians and theologians may consider it logical that they could have joined the disciples of Yeshua, but the Sabeans themselves report that these disciples did not join them, but fled to the territory of Babylonia, where they somehow joined the Sabeans after a while. We actually obtained this information from personal acquaintances among the Sabeans themselves. On the opposite side of Europe, genetic research has unveiled that nearly 1/5 of the current population in the Iberian Peninsula, which is Spain and Portugal, can trace their ancestry back to Jews who were compelled to convert to Catholicism during the Inquisition. But we could also mention all those assimilated Jews who might be unaware of their heritage or choose to deny it, as it was my own case a few years ago. For these individuals, the revelation of their Israelite lineage can sometimes evoke feelings of resistance, shame, or even open hostility towards Jews. The false Black Hebrew Israelite theory. A spreading and destructive phenomenon that causes great harm in the world of black people. The Black Hebrew Israelites are a movement whose followers believe they are descending from the ancient Israelites of the Bible. This community developed among African Americans in the United States more than a century ago. Members of the movement often assert that black Africans are the original Israelites and they must return to ancient Jewish religious and cultural roots. The majority of its supporters believe that Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews are not descendants of the original Israelites or converted proselytes. According to them, the true Israelites are the black African people, especially those who came to America as part of the African diaspora. This is supported by prophecies that in the last days, He, which means Elohim, will bring back the sons and daughters of Israel from the four corners of the earth in ships. They interpret this as a prophecy fulfilled during the African slave trade, which proves that it is about them and that they are the real Israelites. Well, the prophecies say just the opposite. He, Elohim, brings the lost tribes back home from slavery and captivity to freedom, not the other way around. But this is only one of the many contradictions. I don't even want to discuss them here. I'm just pointing out, as a warning, the falsity of this theory, so that those who are imprisoned in it should come out, and not by boat, but mainly in a spiritual sense. In essence, the feeling of black superiority and a false identity of being the chosen were formed as a compensation for the fate of slavery and the centuries-long injuries that they had to suffer from the white man. This is none other than a form of modern replacement theology, specially tailored to blacks, the sole purpose of which is not the destruction of the real Israel, but the final annihilation of those who believe in this theory, first on the level of their identity, and then even on the level of their actual spirit. Their claims to be the real Jews are mainly based on the following verse of Deuteronomy, which they are endlessly pointing at. Yahuwah will send you back in ships to Egypt, on a journey I said you should never make again. There you will offer yourselves for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, but no one will buy you. Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 68. And here the question arises, can these people read English or any other translation if they speak other languages too, including Hebrew? Have any one of them been brought back to Egypt till this day, trying to sell themselves to the local people and them not wanting to buy them back? They've been brought to America where people, unfortunately, indeed wanted them to be their slaves. The Jews of the diaspora today, on the contrary, we are in Egypt again, in the world as an Egypt. But no one has ever wanted us. We have tried to assimilate and be part of their nations for 2,000 years, but they refused that. Sooner or later, they end up expelling us or even kill us. That's a historical fact. Furthermore, several prophecies about the gathering of the chosen people speak of bringing them back on camels, ships, and chariots in Jerusalem to the Holy Land from the four corners of the earth. Back to the Holy Land and not to Egypt. And this is visible since the middle of the 19th century, and especially since 1948, when the State of Israel was reborn. Not only is there no historical basis for the matter, but the fulfillment of signs, miracles, and prophecies experienced over the centuries and especially in the last century point to everything but not to what they claim. The hand of Elohim so spectacularly carries and protects the identity of real Judaism that is undeniable, as I discussed the matter in my teachings called State of Israel and Zionism and Anti-Semitism and Anti-Christianity. Furthermore, haven't these people ever read the stories in the book of the Song of Songs, the book of Kings, Samuel, and the Chronicles? When the Queen of Sheba herself asks, with a certain inferiority complex, that the daughters of Jerusalem should not smile at the sight of the color of her skin, as well as the description of David when Samuel sees him for the first time, red hair, pink face, etc. Absolutely no trace of any kind of Afro-American looking guy. So allow me a personal message to these people believing in this Black Hebrew Israelite false teaching. Once again, as I commented to some of you under my last video called The Synagogue of Satan, you should not want to become Jews by taking the place of the real ones. Even if some of us are really members of this false synagogue, as I explained in that video, you, the black people, can also be the chosen people of Elohim by finally accepting the blood of the Lamb and be born again and filled with Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. Not on the theoretical level you are, but for real, when the signs and wonders will testify of your born-again spiritual state. As long as you claim a false identity and seek your salvation by your deeds, wanting to fulfill the law by yourself in the flesh, and not by accepting the Messiah's fulfillment of the commandments in your hearts, you will still remain in darkness and death. Not speaking about this completely satanic statement of yours, which consists of excluding everybody from salvation that does not belong to your bloodline. I can understand your animosity towards white people, so I advise you to contact born-again Afro-American brothers in your surroundings and ask them not to preach to you, but to pray for you. Pray so that you receive the Holy Spirit, start to speak in tongues, start to prophesize, so that your eyes should finally be open to the truth of Yeshua. Let's go through baptism of water and fire and seek for black born-again servants of Elohim who can help you come out from this darkness. I will put a link below where you can find people in your surroundings that are not going to bring you under the yoke of some institutional human church, but into the Holy Church, the body of Yeshua. And as we will see in what follows, there are black-skinned Israelites actually, but this lineage does not apply to all black-skinned people or those who were deported to America as slaves. The black-skinned Jews are originally Semites who became black through mixing and mutations over the millennia and not the other way around. All anthropologists and biologists know very well that the color of the skin is not the main criteria which defines a blood lineage or a race. The gathering is underway in the state of Israel. The gathering, as I mentioned it before, is also taking place at a different and a more official level. There are Israeli religious groups who are actively conducting researches worldwide to locate descendants of the lost tribes, relying on both historical records and genetic data. For instance, there have been reports of dozens of Bnei Menasses, sons of Manasseh, discovered in Central Asia, who were brought back from China to the land of Israel. Members of other tribes have also been found in regions like Black Africa, including Sudan, Ivory Coast, and South Africa. These groups have lived on the fringes of society for centuries, adhering to Talmudic Jewish customs alongside original Mosaic decrees. Interestingly, they have incorporated post-Babylonian Judaic elements, the origins of which remain somewhat unclear. Traditional Jews interpret this as an evidence that the oral doctrine did not originate in Babylon but was part of the revelation received by Moses directly from Yahuwah on Mount Sinai. But in my opinion, it is evident that over the centuries, these groups came into contact with traveling Jews who transmitted these so-called reforms to them, which does not necessarily prove the divine inspiration of the Talmudic literature added to the Torah. However, this topic is not the focus of this article. So it's interesting to observe that the lineage of these Israelites in Asia and Africa can be tracked back to Jacob. And within each ethnic group, there are even descendants of Aaron, the Kohanims. Genetics has confirmed this connection. This leads us to encounter individuals who, although not previously considered part of our community, are indeed Israelites and may appear as perfect black Africans, Indians, or slant-eyed Asians. It is undeniable that this gathering is ongoing in this way also. However, it is important to clarify that based on the prophecies describing the gathering of the people in the end times, this process is not limited to recent decades or years. The term end times refers to the era that began during the time of our Messiah. In fact, Yeshua himself pointed out to his contemporaries that the end times had already begun. These more than 2,000 years of grace constitute the end times, during which the gathering of the Israelite tribes occurs discreetly. Many individuals, including Christians and Palestinian activists, seek to link the return of Jews to Israel, especially those from Eastern Europe, with the false Jews mentioned in the book of Revelation, often referred to as the synagogue of Satan. I addressed this topic in another teaching, and it's true that many genuinely original Jews can be included in this group. However, emerging evidence suggests that the Khazars may also have descended from the deported Israelites, and the masses of European Jews who settled in Israel may simply be awaiting the revelation of their original tribal identity. And as I explained elsewhere, membership in the synagogue of Satan pertains only to those whose belief have been so corrupted that they serve Satan's interests, whether consciously or not, while being Jewish by blood. Satan's Jewish servants, while they may be found in various places like Zionism, Jewish Orthodoxy, or even Christianity, it do not encompass the entire spectrum of individuals categorized as Jews. Furthermore, even those who belong to that synagogue, most of them still have the opportunity to repent and go out of it. The significance of acknowledging the signs. It is crucial to highlight when specific prophecies eagerly anticipated by many believers are already in the process of being realized. When a prophecy is unfolding or has already occurred, it becomes essential for those awaiting it to recognize its fulfillment. This recognition can have implications for understanding subsequent signs and the emergence of other prophecies. Because failing to acknowledge ongoing processes as prophetic events due to expectations of something different in the future may result in missing out on the manifestations of subsequent prophecies. The revival of the Jewish state is indeed a pivotal sign, but it becomes even more significant when we realize that all Jewish tribes are already under reunification there within this state. This understanding helps us appreciate just how close the times are. As for example, and among others, the fact that the Antichrist is not only present somewhere in the world, but it is also possible to identify who he is very precisely. In addition, it is interesting to wonder in what form and under what cover will the 7-year covenant mentioned in Daniel be confirmed and strengthened with many nations. Climate summits, COP28, King Charles III, etc. And this one will soon reveal himself to the world, claiming to be the descendant of King David, in order to deceive a significant portion of the Jews who will accept him as the Messiah. It is important to note that he is not a descendant of Judah either, but rather he is from the tribe of Dan, as prophetic accounts regarding the Antichrist have foretold. Over the course of history, many members of the tribe of Dan settled in the territory of Wales, where the Antichrist was until very recently the prince for decades. This is even more important because when we wait for a prophecy to come true and do not realize that it is already in progress or even very advanced, we risk not recognizing the occurrence of the following events and miss the point because we do not accept that their time has come. Another gathering is currently underway. Meanwhile, the gathering of another group, the body of the Messiah, which symbolically represents the church composed of people characterized in prophecies as Ephraim, is ongoing and nearing its conclusion. Contrary to what many have been thought, it is important to clarify that Judah does not encompass the Jews, while Israel symbolically represents the nations. Judah is the generic term for the southern tribes, and Israel denotes the northern Israelite tribes. Plain and simple. There's no need to overcomplicate matters. The nations are symbolically mentioned in prophecies as Ephraim, one of the sons of Joseph, a foreshadowing of Yeshua, who was adopted by Jacob, just as the father adopts the son of the nations who accept the covenant with Yahushua. If you are not of Jewish origin and have not yet made a covenant with Christ, understand that in the timeline of the gathering promise, Judah and Israel are not the primary focus, but rather you, the nations. Through Yeshua's sacrifice on the cross, your gathering has been ongoing for 2,000 years, a period that may soon conclude, possibly within a few years or even months. We urge you not to be left behind, so do not persist in rejecting the gospel that has likely been shared with you on numerous occasions. And if you are Jewish, the same invitation applies to you. While you may still have some time to consider your conversion, theoretically, it is crucial to understand that when the entire community eventually recognizes Yeshua as the Messiah, as promised, already knowing the truth but delaying your acceptance could be seen as an act of rebellion, or at the very last, as lukewarmness. It would be in your best interest to abandon the false Judaic Talmudic traditions that deny the true identity of the Messiah as soon as possible. If you have already begun to recognize the Messiah's identity within your heart, but hesitate to take the step due to fear of rejection by your community and family, going through the period of tribulation that is coming could prove to be a lot more complicated for you in this case. Let's always remember that the covenant and protection applies only to those who dare to speak and confess the name of the one in whom they believe, Yeshua. Whoever acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before others, I will disown before my Father in heaven. Matthew 10, 32-33. This applies to all the sons of Adam. We must first recognize our state of sin, reject it with disgust, then accept the person of the Savior to find our shalom, or peace with the Father. Then Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, fills us, and our sanctification begins. This is how we receive eternal life through the blood of the Lamb of Elohim, which is Yahushua.